Thanks, Chris. Good.
I don't know what I did to have to sit next to the... I look over and she's got this written, typed sheet. I've got a couple things in chicken scratch and what looks like my terrible 5-year-old handwriting. So, but I want to describe a little bit more about kind of my history with fundraising, and hopefully some of you will be able to relate. I work for a private nonprofit, and for the last 5-6 years, specifically, I've been working with and developing homeless veteran housing, which is kind of an interesting job for someone that grew up in the Unitarian Universalist Church, a pacifist, and not any close links to anyone in the military. So, and really kind of just stumbled into that job. Our executive director said, "Hey, I'm starting this." I said, "Sure, why not? Why wouldn't I want to help?" So, hopefully some of you can relate to my experience in fundraising, which started with naivety, stupidity, and unboundless enthusiasm. So, kind of like I'm a new puppy owner, so I can kind of relate myself to a puppy. When I started out, it was quite clear to me, well, how hard can this be? Homeless vets will go to veterans groups. Of course they're going to want to support this. Well, that didn't prove to be true. I was 20-something at the time, and going in, being a non-veteran, talking about supporting homeless veterans, well, there's a lot of, why aren't they pulling themselves up by their bootstraps? Doesn't the VA take care of them? So forth and so on. So part of fundraising is you're going to get a lot more no's than you are going to get yeses. And that kind of developed we really need to speak to everyone. I can't tell you how supportive knitting groups have been when I've gone out and spoken with them. It's just been amazing. So sometimes what seems like an obvious choice to go and speak to for who would give may not be that obvious. So I think it's really important to speak to everyone, and I think that's mentioned in the book. One of the things that was really shocking to me in the book was that the pastor in some churches isn't signing thank yous. That stunned me. I couldn't, we get calls if I don't send out a thank you for money. And when I was in line, I heard two people talking, and someone said, "Well, don't worry, if we get a donation of $100,000, don't worry, I'll make sure you know, and that thank you goes out." So I hope that's absolutely true, and I think it's vital that the pastor knows what's coming in and the donations, and not just financially. And I think this is one thing in the book that isn't spoken about and to me, stewardship isn't just giving of your money, but we also have to consider giving of your time. In a lot of cases, that equals money. The UU Church in Kent, and I'm sure other churches do this, but part of their fundraising is a event where people can, an auction where people can give of their services and their goods. That's a way that people can give and feel thanked and feel like they're a larger part of the community. Again, it's a careful line that you want to walk, where it's, in the book, you don't want people just being able to buy their way into heaven. And I would argue that just because you're giving money, he says that's, a measuring stick, but I think we need to look at not only are you giving money, but are you giving time? Has that person's time, dropped off from their volunteering? So I think the pastor's job, unfortunately, is more difficult in looking not in just money, but what happens if someone who has been attending or has been volunteering, if that goes down also. I think that's also something that the pastor has to look at, and is an important part of stewardship is also time. And let other people speak. But the last thing that I think really effective in what he talked about is when he talked about different ways to do budgets. Line item budgets, while they're needed, they're not sexy, and they certainly don't give the whole picture of what we do in the church. So, people, don't necessarily give, oh great, we're going to pay the electric bill. Yes, that needs to be done, but I think we're much more excited about the social justice that the church is involved in, the green activities that the church is involved in, and that's absolutely why people give. And I think whenever we give and when we develop, we have to develop different handles and show how the money is changing lives, because that certainly is happening. So it's not just that you give money and it pays the electric bill, but you pay money and how is it changing UU lives. And that's certainly more difficult than the line item budget. But the mission needs to be a living mission, and the budget needs to refer back to the mission. So it needs to be a living mission, and the budget needs to refer back to that, and the giving needs to refer back to that. Thank you.
I'm Al Schwartz, and I consider myself a pseudo-professional fundraiser. As I say, I'm the behind-the-scenes person. I'm the data person. I'm not the one out there asking people for money regularly. However, I do often say there is the art and science of raising money, and Christina there had the art side of it. I do the science side. That's where I am most comfortable. And so when I read the book, I focused a lot more on the practical pieces. And as Ward said, I'm on the Canvas committee at our church. And so I'm thinking about what are the specifics that I can do that will make a difference. And so as I was reading through the book, I also jotted down a few notes. I did not write out a whole piece. But I think about all of the other nonprofits that I have worked in, and they have very sophisticated fundraising departments. They're staffed with many different people who focus in many different areas. Churches are often staffed with volunteers, and it's very easy for them to burn out when you look at the whole wealth of everything that we should be doing. So focus on the first piece, the small piece. Start small, get something working, and then move to the next piece. And as Ward said, one of my philosophies is if you don't ask, you don't get. And when I first started on the committee, we never told anybody what they should be doing. And now we try to put suggestions out there of where people should be giving. And that was a very small thing that had a huge impact on our Canvas. Not to say that we're always as successful as we would like, but that's one piece. Then we can move to the next piece. So start with a couple of small things and add from there. We know our minister must be involved, and I try very hard to involve our minister in places where we can, but I also know he has a wealth of other things he needs to be focusing on that in many ways are even more important. The sort of pastoral care of the church that needs to take place, the focus on the vision and the mission, which ultimately helps the fundraising piece. So I try to figure out how is it that I can help him by making it easy for him to have his participation and his involvement. What can I take off his plate? What is on his plate that potentially could get spread out amongst other staff members within the church? Testimonials absolutely help, and they build on emotions. And I listen to Christina's story and I listen to Ward's story, and it makes me think, wow, I really want to give back. And we know that in our church. And we do try to do testimonies, probably not as often as we should, definitely not as often as we should. But when you speak to that emotion, people feel so much better about what they're doing, and they get excited about giving back. And it should be an exciting thing to do. And again, sort of my last point is, if you don't ask, you don't get that. And that is true for all levels, all three pockets of our money. When you are asking for that regular pledge, you have to make the ask. You have to be willing to talk about money and let people know what the expectations are. When you're looking at that special project and you're asking from that second pocket of money, you have to set the expectation. And I know this was a question I put out to a committee just recently at our church. We just celebrated the 20th anniversary of our minister's time with us. And so there was a call to create a fund in his name, both to help renovate our organ and hopefully name a space at a local nonprofit. And the first question I said to that committee is, what do you need? I need to understand how much I should be giving out of my second pocket of money. And we know, and yes, Ward, you said it, and I'll say it again, we're not very good at planned giving, but if you don't ask, you will not get. And that's just crucial. And then make sure at the end of it, as Matt said, that you say thank you.